Today on the Middle Ground, Kansas has reduced or eliminated income taxes, and now Missouri has followed suit. What does this mean for states like Oklahoma, and how does it affect our ability to lure business to the Sooner State? We'll have all this and more right here on the Middle Ground. Oklahomans need their voice in the public policy conversation. Every discussion about public policy solutions right now is Washington-centric. So the Middle Ground focuses on shifting the conversation back here to the heartland and what the people of Oklahoma think about their lives and their future. The status quo is failing. Regardless of what your beliefs are, the status quo isn't working. Well, that's a middle ground. That is the middle concept that we can all agree on. From the middle, we can come and find those solutions together that empower our people and create opportunity for all. Good morning, Oklahoma, and welcome to the Middle Ground. I'm your host, Michael Carnuccio.
And I'm Trent England, host of MiddleGround Radio, as you can hear every weekday from 7 to 9 a.m. on AM 1640 The Eagle. Of course, Michael, you hosted MiddleGround Radio the last 2 days of this week, so
that's right, well, Trent. I hope you still have a show on Monday morning. No, great opportunity. Thanks for letting me sit in the chair for a little bit. Fascinating opportunity to continue the conversation we have on this show. Folks are interested in how session's going to follow. They're wanting to know about the budget. They're wanting to know about taxes. You hear about that all week on your show as well.
Well, that's right, and especially this week with budget details actually starting to trickle out from the Capitol. Good to finally get some numbers and to see how things might wrap up. Although we'll find out, I guess.
Of course, as we've been talking about on this show, the numbers are over a $600 million shortfall, 611 to 646, depending on who you hear at the Capitol talking. Of course, those are millions of dollars. There's been discussion about delaying the tax cut that's supposed to be experienced by Oklahomans. There's been a talk about bond packages, the Capitol. Everything seems to be on the table at this point. What are you hearing?
Well, and scaffolding going up around the Capitol too.
Right.
So no, it's you know, this push against the tax cut, I think, is a particularly important thing for people to pay attention to. I don't think that this is going to happen, that they'll delay the tax cut. But it does help us understand where some people are in Oklahoma City and in some cases around the state, but mostly it's the political class right here. You know, postponing the tax cut is a drop in the bucket, less than 10% of the budget shortfall, and yet some people just don't want to ever cut government back.
Well, and we should point out that the tax cut is scheduled to go into effect January this year. So in essence, any change of that becomes a tax increase on Oklahomans. And we're going to talk this show about the competitive marketplace we live in this region, and what's happening in Kansas, what's happening in Missouri. We've talked about Texas quite a bit on this show. Let's talk about how Oklahoma compares with other states. Last week you were at a national conference having conversation with several other states about reforms they're going through or actions the states are taking to be more competitive.
Well, the exciting thing about being an Oklahoman and going to these national conferences of people who care about the Constitution is that Scott Pruitt is always there, our state attorney general, and I mean it's really a thrill. And people come up to me afterward and say, "Wow, you're so fortunate to live in Oklahoma." On the other hand, we heard from Maine's Governor Paul LePage, who's been tackling entitlements and really taking on some of the thorniest problems. I mean, to the extent that people have said he was crazy, they said he was going to lose his reelection. He won reelection. He's really driving the agenda there. And, you know, it drives home the point to me that as much as people get caught up in all the federal issues, we can make changes right here at the state level. There are a lot of things that we can do in Oklahoma.
You talk about Governor LePage, and I've noticed this interesting dynamic. I wonder if this came up, that in blue states or states that may have just gone red in terms of their state government in the past, say, 2 to 3 election cycles, but it's a tighter majority, it seems like the governors are really leading and really out in front. In states with a pretty large Republican majority right now, most of the states in the union, of course, red states and those dynamics, it seems like the legislature has more of an influential role. Is that just a dynamic of constitutional government, or is that because of the leaders at play?
Well, I think there are 3 things that happen. One is when you have veto-proof majorities, then governors lose some of their relevance in the legislative process. But a couple of the other dynamics is that in a state that people just count on staying red, people lose their sense that we've got to do things right now. The immediacy drains away, and you get a lot of folks, I think, sort of lose their courage. And the other fact is that when one party stops being relevant, whether it's the Democrats in Oklahoma or the Republicans in California, you wind up with a lot of people who would be, in Oklahoma, a lot of people who would be Democrats sign on to be Republicans because that's their path to power. And so it tends to, I think, dilute that party that holds them. They look so powerful, but whether they can actually stick to their principles is a big question.
I want to stay right there on the concept of power and tie in this national conference that you were just at, because you also had a debate in Oklahoma this past week, but then also participated in the same discussion in Bellevue, Washington, of course, around the national popular vote.
Around the First Amendment.
That's right.
Around this issue of privacy and the First Amendment. It's a fascinating issue because people, if you say Supreme Court, people think of the justices they know, maybe Scalia and Thomas, conservatives. They go opposite directions on this issue. Does the First Amendment protect privacy when it comes to politics? And a fascinating debate that we had here in Oklahoma. And this panel, the week before, it was stunning to find out that in states like California, you actually have the state attorney general trying to force the disclosure of donors to private nonprofit groups. This has never really happened before in our country. Basically, groups, she doesn't like their agenda, so she tries to expose their donors. This has been an issue in California for a while with people supporting political causes that maybe aren't real popular, who get attacks on their businesses, get harassed. It's really disturbing. It's an important debate, I think, and we support transparency in government, but when it comes to private people, private associations, privacy is important.
Of course, you're always talking national popular vote, so I slipped there, and you're typically fine. So we have just a little bit of time before our first break. Anything that stands out to you about this conversation we're going to have today about the competitiveness in this region and taxes?
Well, the governor has said it before. Oklahoma is in a tax sandwich. And the great thing about American federalism, which is ties into the national popular vote issue and a lot of other things, is that states compete, and states compete for jobs, which means they compete for their economic well-being, which means they compete for tax revenue. And if we want to be able to live in a low-tax state, that means that we have to have a growing economy and generate the revenue that we need for roads and schools and things like that by having a growing economy rather than just going after higher taxes.
This is going to be a good show today. Folks, we need to take a quick break. The Kansas side of the Kansas City has been outpacing the Missouri side since Kansas tax cuts went into effect, but Missouri is fighting to change that. When we return, we'll talk with the former Missouri House Speaker to see what that state is doing to keep pace and what Oklahoma needs to do. Stay with us.
What is hope? You cannot see it nor hear it, and though you can't touch it, you can feel it. You feel it when your heart is full and spirit strong. You know when hope is present, and you certainly feel it when it is gone. The original meaning of hope was synonymous with trust, a promise, a confidence, even salvation. Central Oklahoma Habitat for Humanity has been providing this type of hope to our community for nearly 3 decades. And just like the homes we've built, repaired, and rebuilt, our hope gives families joy and peace, protection, strength, courage, and comfort. It gives them endurance, warmth, and confidence they so desperately needed. If you are searching for hope or wanting to provide hope for those in such a need, please contact us, Central Oklahoma Habitat for Humanity, building houses, building hope.
We have a vision of Oklahoma that in the 21st century, you and I can be living in a daily land run where freedom just seems to seep out of the ground, where free enterprise creates opportunity for everyone at all levels of society. That is the type of Oklahoma that we were founded on. That's what this state was created upon, and that's where we see our future. OCPA is founded on the philosophy that free markets, individual liberty, individual initiative, and personal responsibility are what build safe, sustainable societies. It's what empowers people. Anyone, no matter what their hopes or their dreams are, should care about the success of OCPA, because as we breed excellence, as we succeed, what we're doing is ensuring that they have every opportunity available to them at their fingertips, and that no matter how big their dream, they can achieve it, because we're going to clear that pathway for them. Welcome back. Joining us in studio now is Tim Jones, former Missouri House Speaker. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen. It's good to be here.
We've talked quite a bit on this show about Texas, but more importantly lately, Kansas and what's happening in Kansas. Let's start with Missouri. What is happening in the Show Me State?
Well, I'm proud to tell you that in the Show Me State, we decided to literally put our money where our mouth is, and Kansas did put a lot of pressure on Missouri over the last few years to do something about our extremely antiquated tax structure. The last time our tax brackets were reviewed in any way, reduced, amended, revised, was in the 1930s.
Oh.
We felt that nearly a century was long enough. Now, a lot of folks in the governor's office, the governor is a Democrat in Missouri, disagreed, and a lot of other people who enjoy government didn't want us to touch the tax code, but we decided to go forward with a tax cut, the first ever in nearly 90 years. The first time we didn't have enough votes to override the governor's veto, we tried again, and we had one Democrat cross over and make history with us in the last session.
Well, and we talked about this earlier this week on the radio. You mentioned the top tax bracket was pretty low, and I mean, tell folks what that tax structure looked like in Missouri. That was fascinating.
We had essentially a very high flat tax because back in 1930s money, our brackets topped out at $9,000. So there were 7 or 8 taxing brackets, but the top one was at $9,000, 6%. So if you're an entry-level worker making $20,000, $25,000 a year, you were taxed at 6%. If you were a very successful entrepreneur and made a lot more money, you were taxed at 6%. It was a high, regressive, flat tax. We took a stab at it. We got it through the legislature. We're going to have a 0.5% cut that will go into effect next year if, very importantly, the revenue triggers are met and we have the revenue to support it in our state.
So I want to ask you about something specific that you said a minute ago in terms of the Kansas dynamic with Missouri, because in that chair that you're sitting in, we've had several Oklahoma lawmakers this year come on the show and immediately go to the competitiveness with north of the border. You heard Trent talk about our governor has discussed this income tax sandwich. So what were those discussions like, and when did it become such a big dynamic for Missouri? What was happening in Kansas?
Well, what we began to realize was something that I believe you addressed earlier on the show. We're in a 50-state economy, and especially in Missouri, we're bordered by 8, well, I always have to take Illinois out, right? 7 highly competitive states. And you know, honestly, Illinois could be slowly rounding the corner because they elected a Republican governor, and Governor Rauner has decided he's going to try to make some big reforms in that state. So we're in the middle of 8 very hyper-competitive states who compete every day for more jobs and opportunity. And the Kansas model of making a significant investment in taxpayers and not government really was a solicitation for us to do the same.
And your state has an interesting political dynamic. You have a liberal Democrat as governor. You have a very conservative legislature. I mean, have people embraced that message? I mean, here in Oklahoma, it feels like people embrace the message, but the politicians have been sort of slow to follow along. I mean, what's the dynamic in Kansas, and then where are you going beyond this initial tax cut?
Yeah, Missourians tend to like divided government in some sort, and it's been that way for many decades, where we've slowly trended towards a more and more Republican, conservative supermajority now. And you know what? I think that's important because the House is the people's house, and it's where the budget originates. The House is the keeper of the people's purse. So the people are obviously more comfortable with Republicans watching the budget and the bottom line. The governor ran as a very conservative Truman-era Democrat and definitely governed that way in his first term. His second term, he sort of moved back the other way. Missourians re-elected us in the legislature, overwhelmingly historic re-election, which was a very strong sign to me that they wanted tax reform, they wanted litigation reform, they wanted education reform, and that's why they put lawmakers of the conservative bent in charge of passing the laws.
So take us inside, as Speaker, inside your caucus discussion. We know here in Oklahoma, we hear all the time, well, the budget, we don't know how we're going to get this done, or this faction wants this and that. How are you able not only to bring the tax cut forward, but I'm fascinated by the fact that you were even able to reach across the aisle and get someone to come across and check their own governor of that party to move the tax cut and be able to override the governor's veto. What is that like?
It was very interesting. It was the most exciting and most challenging job I've ever had in my life. We have the 4th largest House in the country. We have 163 representatives.
Wow.
I had 109 Republicans. I was the chief cat herder, the cat herder in chief. And what's interesting, the Kansas dynamic cannot be understated. It was the Kansas City, Missouri Republican delegation that came to us and said, we need to move a bill. We are seeing job losses and business losses on an epic scale. Kansas is right to work, Missouri is not. So we had that against us as well. You couple that with a major give by the government back to the taxpayers in the form of that strong of a business incentive, that strong of a jobs and opportunity incentive. It's a recipe for utter disaster for Kansas City, Missouri. So the Kansas City, Missouri delegation led the battle on that. They were the ones who advanced the bill. I was just in charge of keeping all the trains running on time. Like I said, the first time around, the education establishment worked against us very hard. I always say, and many say in Missouri, don't get between a superintendent and a dollar bill, They'll claw your eyes out.
We've experienced that here.
I've learned that the issues are the same in a lot of the states. So we had to overcome that dynamic and convince people the second time around this was not going to harm public education. It was going to strengthen it. This was not going to harm working families in Missouri. It was going to allow them the opportunity to grow. This was going to give people more choices. I always say, whose budget are you talking about? You're not talking about the taxpayers' budgets. You're talking about government's budget in losing money. Where's that loss of money go? Back to the people. They know what's best to do with it.
I'll tell you what, this is a theme that we've heard here in Oklahoma throughout session. I know it's coming up here toward the end. I want to stick right there, and when we come back, dive a little bit more into that dynamic and what you experienced in Missouri, because maybe it translates here to Oklahoma and our viewers would like to see. Folks, we'll talk more about that, the impact here on the budget in Oklahoma off of this issue. Stay tuned.
A well's output is only as strong as landing the production stream. In extreme conditions, call for extreme durability. At Syntec, our engineers understand what matters. That's why we craft centralizers differently than anyone else in the industry. Laser cut from a single piece of special steel alloy and featuring an innovative heat-treated stop collar. Syntec centralizers create optimum standoff and flexibility for enhanced cementation in any conditions. It's simply smarter. No welding, no weak points. That means minimum torque, greater strength, and superior drag reduction. From lateral shale operations on land to ultra-deep water, you only have to buy it once. No fishing, no failures, no BS. Our best-in-class centralizers outperform the competition on any rig and any challenge. And we've got customizable simulations to prove it. We know that downtime isn't an option, and we take pride in providing our customers a world-class product with world-class service and support, made in the USA. Others still try to imitate it, but none can replicate it, not even close. There's only one centralizer this strong, Syntec Centralizers, an international symbol of quality.
They didn't see that she was normal, but different. They just seen her with a disability.
The foundation of it is to provide a choice to those parents who know best for their children of what would be the best educational environment for them.
They are way behind at the start of the race. This is just helping them catch up a little bit.
They saw our children and how well they're doing, that they'd understand why this is important.
Welcome back, folks. We're here today talking with former Missouri House Speaker Tim Jones, and let's start with this point we just left on in terms of education, because that seems to be the dynamic in Oklahoma. If you talk about taxes or budget, immediately the education lobby is the most powerful in the conversation. Did you see the same thing, Missouri?
Absolutely, and I've seen it nationwide, gentlemen. I've been traveling across the country, and it's funny, the names, the faces, and the issues are the issues are the same in the states. The names may be a little different, but they're the same issues, and the education establishment is one of the most powerful lobbying groups I've seen in this country, and I think to the detriment of children. You know, superintendents, unfortunately now, and a lot of the teachers' unions, they view children as revenue units, you know, units of monetary income and the bottom line, whereas education reformers like myself and probably both of you view children as our future. And if we're not going to educate them properly, and we're just looking at making a certain number on a test score, that's not going to be a recipe for success. There's more to education than just dumping billions of more dollars into the system. We've done that for the last 35 years. The education spending has ballooned like a hockey stick. It's gone, that famous hockey stick, straight up in the air. Guess what test scores have done? They've held flat. There's been no progress whatsoever. It's time to do some true education reform. And so these issues of cutting taxes, of budgets, and education reform are all inextricably intertwined, because the teachers' unions and the superintendents are against all change.
Well, and education reform is something that I know our Chamber of Commerce here in Oklahoma has talked about, the importance of better schools, more opportunity for kids in the business climate. I think we talk a lot about taxes, but have you seen that? I mean, is that part of the dynamic in Missouri where businesses, they care about education and they get that the establishment isn't always about quality?
That's a great question, because I think it's transitioning slowly over time where they're finally starting to understand that concept. I think at first there was a big disconnect. They also saw, well, maybe what the legislature should do is appropriate some more money every year for workforce development. They weren't focused on those important K through 12 years as much. I think now they are. Definitely in Missouri and definitely in Kansas, because I see that very closely as well. But even in states like Illinois, which we pick on a lot, there's the idea in the inner urban areas. We've got strange alliances forming between Republicans and inner city black Democrats who are just fed up with the teachers' unions, because it's been 50 years of failure and a lack of success. Let's let parents make some choices. Charter schools, virtual schools, even voucher programs, those show that test scores go up. People like Jeb Bush proved it in Florida.
So let's bring this back to Oklahoma, okay? Why does Missouri matter in Oklahoma, Kansas, everything else? I want to start by asking, does Oklahoma matter in other states? Are people talking about Oklahoma in Missouri?
Yes, they are. In fact, when I was majority leader and speaker, Oklahoma was one of the states I pointed to that I wanted Missouri to emulate. So you should all be very proud of yourselves. I used states like Oklahoma, like Kansas, and like Tennessee. All of those states were, well, Tennessee has no income tax, but Kansas and Oklahoma were making improvements in their tax code for the taxpayers. I believe that results in more jobs and opportunity when people have more personal income to spend. We're Americans, we're a consumer society. We're going to put those dollars back into the system and grow the economy. You don't grow the economy by taking more money from the job creators. So I pointed to Oklahoma and I said, look, Oklahoma has got two really great things going for it. It passed right to work in 2001. They're seeing the benefits of that in their workforce by having more jobs and more companies move here. And they're passing a series of important, cautious, yet significant tax cuts that are going to result in more revenue for the state government eventually, not less.
Of course, it takes a while for those things to have an effect. When do you think in Missouri you'll start to actually see the effect in revenues going up from greater economic growth?
Well, you know what's interesting is our tax cut officially will not be available to go into effect till next year, and it has to be based on a revenue trigger. Well, guess what? Consumer confidence must be up in Missouri, because this year our revenues are up nearly 8%. Now, the cut hasn't gone into effect, but everybody knows it's coming because our editorial board writers told everybody it would be the end of the world if it was here. People aren't spending money because they're afraid of a tax cut. They're spending money because they have confidence that the economy is going to go even higher. And I think you're seeing the same thing happen in Oklahoma. You're seeing an increase in state revenues. You're seeing an increase in job creation.
A little less than a minute left. I want to ask you about the full picture of the country and where Oklahoma sits in the middle. What dynamic are you seeing at play?
So one of the things I was here to talk about today was the very famous analysis of this in How Money Walks. I'm with a company now whose CEO, Travis Brown, has put together an intensive survey of all 50 states. And in a nutshell, what it shows is high tax, high regulation, non-right to work states are losing people. People are talking with their feet. They're moving to low tax, pro-worker freedom states that provide more jobs and opportunity. It's a fact, and you know where the data comes from? The IRS itself.
Fascinating. Well, folks, you can go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/MiddleGround TV, or our Twitter handle @MiddleGround TV to get more of that information. Former Speaker Jones, thank you so much for being here.
Having
appreciate
me.
your time.
Really appreciate the time.
Folks, we'll be back right after this.
Yeah, the Liberty Foundation's job is to essentially shape the debate in states, and we do that by going into the states and making sure that we talk with local groups about how to talk about the jobs issue, how to frame the debate on the jobs issue, so that way it's connecting with American citizens in a way that is pro-free market.
And we can really lead on these issues to try to marry the needs of business, who need talent if they're going to keep the jobs in America, with the needs of the individual who needs those skills if they want to elevate their ability to earn and live their version of the American dream.
So a competitive federalism and a really understanding how competition is healthy for the people in creating liberty and freedom for everyone. I think that in a macro sense is our greatest challenge going forward.
I faced numerous challenges. Me and both of my children were homeless.
Positive Tomorrows is Oklahoma's only elementary school serving homeless children, and we serve students that are in grades kindergarten through 5th grade.
We're a temporary solution to help families who are going through difficult times.
Give parents in poverty the opportunity to send their child to a different school other than their neighborhood public school by giving them a savings account that would allow them to make some choices based on what their child needs.
There's so much potential in our school, and the ESA laws would completely just allow us to tap into that potential.
And that's all we want for our kids, is to know that there's something beyond this. They're not their situation.
Welcome back, folks. Trent, it's going to be another busy week this week. What do we got? About 2 weeks left in the legislative session. Of course, the legislature could always adjourn early, but what's coming up for the radio program?
Well, this will be an exciting week for the radio show. There's a big conference coming to Oklahoma City, kind of a feather in the city's cap, and that is the Southern Republican Leadership Conference. They do these regional meetings where they draw a lot of Republicans together and bring in what looks like just about all of the contenders for the Republican nomination. And we will be broadcasting MiddleGround Radio on location from there, talking with some of the attendees, hopefully talking with some of the candidates. That's this Thursday, Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. on AM 1640.
What else do you expect to hear about this week as session's coming to a close? Anything that our viewers should watch for or listen for in the debates?
Well, there will be a lot of, the end of the legislative session, and really the end, the last couple of days is where a lot of action happens. We're going to make sure on the radio show that we let people know what's going on and what they can do about it, because citizen voices should be heard right until that gavel hits.
And again, folks, you can live tweet during the radio program at MiddleGround TV. Go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/MiddleGround TV. That's all the time we have for today on the Middle Ground. Catch Trent weekday morning, 7 to 9 a.m. on 1640 AM The Eagle. We'll be back next week and stay with you through the end of session. Until then, folks, make it a great week, work hard, and have fun, Oklahoma.